Today on AI Meets API, we're joined by Santosh Su, Senior Director of the Consumption Team at Mulesoft. With over 12 years of experience across consulting, SaaS, retail, and CPG, Santosh brings deep expertise in MuleSoft, Salesforce, AI, and APIs. He's led cloud, hybrid, and AI-driven integration initiatives that help organizations build scalable, connected solutions. Over to you, Ajay.
Hey Santosh, great to have you here. This is one of the podcasts I'm looking forward to it from some time. We spoke a lot in the offline, so really want to get your thoughts more in deep into the topics of interest to this podcast. And starting with this, your role is a bit intriguing. Can you tell me a little more about what does the consumption, head of consumption at MuleSoft means?
Sure. And before we start, Ajay, like big fan of the podcast. I intently listened to previous episodes. In fact, the last episode of like Ajay was amazing, right? I think was very intriguing and very informative for me. So thanks for doing this. Yeah, going back to the role, I think the way I think about it is like this is the evolution of go to market as we see it, and not just specifically MuleSoft, Salesforce in general in the industry. If you think through this wave of change, it is probably the most massive exponential change after internet. I think cloud and mobile was hugely influential to how companies operated, and Salesforce was born out of cloud, but it didn't fundamentally change how people work, right? It was incremental. And now it is absolutely exponential, and in that GTM is evolving. So the way we think about it, most of like native tooling and application that is coming out of this evolution are consumption oriented. And why it is consumption oriented? Because customer want to see value, and as soon as they see value they want to invest more, and they want that virtuous loop to continue. And this is where I almost think consumption is equal to revenue, right, for companies. Like if you are an AI native company, right? So in the new GTM, then there is no pre-sales, no post-sales, the notions that we used to have in a typical go-to-market selling motion. It's just everybody is in making the customer successful business, and thereby everybody sells, right? So I would say from that, this role is there in MuleSoft. And if you look at my team's singular goal, is to continue to increase the ROI for customer, which is basically the ratio between the value and consumption, right? If they consume more, are we able to justify that they're getting exponentially more value? Thus, they continue on that consumption journey. And if that consumption journey continues, we know at some point of time the customer is going to expand their footprint with MuleSoft, which is beneficial to them because they get more value, and then beneficial to us as a company because we grow these customers and we become the growth engine of the company, right? So we operate within MuleSoft, Agentforce, and Data Cloud, but I see it as a starting point of something happening larger within Salesforce as well as in the industry.
Okay, sounds good. So one thing you stressed out is value, right? So how do you see what are the different type of value messaging in general integration provides, and does that messaging have changed over the years, or was it the same all along?
I don't think integration as a problem has changed over the years, right? And then I think it's going to be a pervasive problem, as in fact you see it in AI even more, because the people who are actually getting significant value of AI, it's not they have figured out AI, they have actually figured out integration, right? So and it will continue to be a problem because teams operate in silos. Human beings are like that. And as long as human beings operate in silos, you will need integration, right? Like because they will build software or technology or teams in silos, and then somebody has to come and integrate that to actually get a cohesive solution, right? Having said that, I think when we started originally with integration, the value prop, at least the way it was told, is in a very technical way, right? Like things like, oh, how fast we were able to develop this integration versus the way we used to custom code in the past and stuff like that. Today, the value of integration, the way we tell, and there are three audience that we tell those values to, right? So there is the builder audience, which is the developers, And for them, what matters is how fast they can develop these integrations and how fast they can not only develop, they can deploy, manage, secure, govern, all of that. Like anything not visible to users, but actually day in, day out work for the developer community, that matters to them. So, which is all the tooling around building integrations matters to them, right? Then you got the second constituent, which is operators, people who operate this platform. They're not building it, but they're managing it, they're updating it, they're improving the platform and all of that, right? Which is your typical like infrastructure teams, enterprise architects are involved. For them, it's the ease of use, ease of things like deployment, observability, monitoring, alerting, the intelligence that you can draw from the platform where you can know, are you using it optimally? Is your system health great? Is your deployment health great? All of that matters to them, right? And then they also need to know some level of value in terms of things like reusability, things like, percentage of their applications which are API led and things like that, because they're operators. And then finally, you got the users. These are the business teams, these are the finance, HR, supply chain teams whose applications run on integrations. The backend is these integrations. For them, things that matter is time to market. Things that matter to them is resiliency, right? If we had holidays and nothing went down with 10x of volume on my e-commerce site, that matters to them. Integrations per se doesn't matter to them. They don't see it. But what matters to them is the business impact. And this is where we are talking about if it's an HR application, like is my employee onboarding faster than what I used to do? If it's an e-commerce applications where I able to go to a new region faster because I could reuse the APIs that was built out for like different region and I could actually launch it faster and capture revenue faster before previously, right? So when we tell value today, we tell it from the three lenses, right? A business impact lens for the consumers or the users, a platform operation lens from the operators who actually run the platform, and the platform developer lens from all the developers and builders, right? And that's the combined value. And when you are talking to a particular audience, you story tell accordingly. But to a CIO, you tell all the three stories because they are responsible to their business constituent, they're responsible to their developers, they're also responsible to their operators or the infrastructure teams who run it, right? So that's how I think about the value in the three different lenses. And it will continue to evolve. So for example, an additional dimension now I'm starting to look at is, how many of these integrations or APIs are AI agent ready? So for example, if you think of like the process APIs become a significant action layer for agents. So now that becomes a value prop of like, okay, if X percentage of your process APIs are actually agent action ready. And in which domains? That's not a value that we used to document or story tell 2 years back.
Yes, definitely. I think you articulated very well, Santosh. Yeah, I never heard that much comprehensive value framework. Thanks for that. One challenge usually I seen over the time, right? There is always a front end, back end. Integration being back end, this articulation, because the front end applications, either Salesforce or any ERPs, anything, there most of the even a technical users or a business users get the value proposition faster compared to the back-end systems like integrations. Have you faced that type of a challenge with your stakeholders?
All the time, right? Like, I'll give you a simple example. You don't wake up thinking about plumbing until one day your water is not running, right? Like, so it's the same thing with integration. It's not visible, but the only time it goes down, like everybody is running helter skelter figuring it out why my e-commerce site is not working or why I'm not able to get orders, right? So that's the challenge with being an operator of something that's not visible to the end users, right? And that is where I think the power of storytelling is massive, right? And that's where I think partners like you and me, we have a huge role in coaching our technology teams who run the platform how to storytell the value they are driving for the business users in their own language, right? So for example, if I went to a CIO and told that, hey, MuleSoft platform is driving $10 million value for you because of developer productivity, operational savings, and infrastructure savings, right? That's one story. You take that to a VP of e-commerce, he's like, so what? Right? Now you add a slide to that story before that, hey, the e-commerce site in these 5 countries, we together bring in $200 million of revenue every year. In the back end is powered by an integration solution like MuleSoft, which connects to these backend system to e-commerce, and then tell the platform story. I think that individual gets it, right? Because now he realizes, oh, I see the front end, but I know when an order is placed and that order is getting updated in an order management solution, and then it is calling probably an SAP for something else, and then maybe a return solution in Narvar or whatever, right? They can visualize how that backbone runs, and that is a responsibility almost for our technology teams, our customer technology teams, to story tell the power of the platform in the language of business users. And this is our responsibility as partners also to almost push them and equip them with the right details and content and stories to up level their own stories to their business users. Because without that, as you said, nobody wakes up thinking about integration, right? Because they think about the front end. So that's where the thinking about consumers is key, and we should be continuously, while storytelling to our partners on the customer side, continuously looking how do we storytell in a business lens to the consumer.
Sounds good. Recently, I saw you wrote something about a
Yeah.
cargo framework. Can you explain to our audience what exactly this cargo framework and how did it come
I
to
mean,
life?
I was thinking through a word that is memorable, right? And genuinely aligns to the MuleSoft values. You can see in my backend MuleSoft, plaque. And actually, besides that, small, but the core MuleSoft values, right? We had
Okay.
the 4 core Mule values that we had. And I mean, I live by those values, even today after my 8th year in MuleSoft. But I wanted a keyword, and so MuleSoft has like, think of like two episodes or two lenses, right? Our original episode of being a composable platform, be a reusable platform, all of that still is true. But then now we are the action layer, we are the governance layer, we are the orchestration layer, right? So what I wanted to do is, what is this new MuleSoft which we retain our core foundational values, right, of actionability, reuse, but then on composability and reuse, but on top of it add the actionability and governance and orchestration piece of it, which with our new product launches will come in. And that's where the whole lens of cargo came in. And if you think of a mule, what does a mule do? Mule carries cargo, right? So it meant, the story meant, so synchronous in my head. And that's the new MuleSoft, right? We add now actionability, governance, and orchestration to the original composability and reuse, right? And that's how it becomes cargo.
That's very interesting. This is the first time I heard about it. Yeah, that makes sense.
Oh yeah, I just made it up because for me to remember, if I met a CIO for 10 seconds in an elevator, and if I want to tell them something memorable they will remember, I'm like, we are mule, we carry cargoes, and this is what cargo stands for. I think that's easy for a CIO to remember than me giving a 20 minutes peel of what we do. And that was my attempt at it.
Okay, people who hasn't seen that article, C stands for composability, A stands for actionability, R for reuse, G
G
for
for
governance, O for orchestration. Oh, that's easy to articulate. Thank you. One thing, this consumption, right? Just maybe 5, 10 years back, right? There was no concept of consumption, right? We give a ELA, a software as an ELA, and let the people and there was no customer success at that time. Maybe I'm recollecting my days as a professional services in the TIPCO days. There was no customer success. There was a customer support, but success was not there. Consumption was not. It's all about the professional services doing the all those roles together. Now with this clouds, AWS, Google, and all these game, this is where is that the place where this consumption concept started? Was it there even before that?
So there are three lenses to see. So one, what you were talking about was perpetual licenses, right? We gave customer for upfront, they paid $5 million and they got all you can eat forever, right? And then every year they'll pay, I don't know, 200K for just support, right? In that case, what happened is everybody proved their value in the sales cycle. And when I say value, it's like the dream, right? Like this is potential value you can get. Then they sold the $5 million deal, the software providers, and then the customer was on their own or with a professional services partner or an SI to implement it. Then generally the software vendor didn't have any skin in the game, and they didn't have to, right? Because their revenue wasn't under threat, right? The biggest chunk of the revenue has been already recognized. The only thing they wanted was the 200K support revenue. That wasn't massive. So so that's where no investment in the post sales, call it customer success or account management or whatever support, right? Because they almost felt once the deal was done, account is done, right? Move on to the next thing. And then there no revenue at stake or at risk. With the cloud, right, SaaS model which Salesforce introduced, what happened is your deals are, renewing, either every year or a couple of years or 3 years, right? So if you sold something and you're not selling a $5 million deal, you're probably selling $1 million deal over 5 years or 3 years. So if you did not drive value for the customer has a choice to cancel the subscription, right? So now your revenue is at risk every year or every 3 years. So companies realize that and they have to be there to help them guide through the right kind of implementation with their SI partners and professional services because their revenues were at risk, right? But that definitely started this whole concept of customer success. But I think consumption started more with, I would say, infrastructure aligned, softwares, because even SaaS, most SaaS was sold seat based, right? Like Salesforce was an example, but most of the SaaS, the technology that started being sold as an utility almost was infrastructure, which is AWS and other hyperscalers, then databases like Mongo and stuff like that, some cases networking. And this is where the concept of consumption came in, because a significant chunk of customers were almost pay as you go model, right? So you're if they're not consuming, you're not even revenue recognizing, right? So it's not concept anymore. Your CFO cares about it, right? I mean, a lot of the deals are pre-commit deals, right? Even AWS, like most of their large deals are pre-commit, but then that pre-commit has to be driven to actual consumption, right? And the way revenue recognition works is they book the deal, but they don't recognize the revenue until the workloads move to cloud. So if you are not focused on driving the workloads to actually its destination in production, you as a company is not recognizing revenue, right? So now your survival is directly tied to somebody driving the actual consumption versus the promised goal that you defined, right? And so truly the consumption oriented motion came with these infrastructure aligned technologies, which were truly, utility kind of a model. But with AI, what is happening is most of AI native tooling and technologies are going more consumption oriented because customers genuinely want to pay that way. I see value, I'll pay for it, and then I'll add some more capacity and I want to see immediate value. They don't want to wait for year, 2 years, 5 years to see the value. They want to see the value in weeks and they're ready to, invest more. That's why you see a company like Lovable going from 0 to 100 million under a year, right?
Yeah.
You see a company like Cursor going from 0 to 500 million under 3 years, right? Because once the customer sees the value, they're ready to spend, but they want to see immediate value, like very, very fast value versus waiting for a couple of years to see the value. And this is where the whole motion of, consumption comes into the picture.
Makes sense. Uh, as you mentioned, and previous guests also mentioned, 90% of these AI use cases orchestration is a critical thing. So what kind of things you are hearing from the customers and how you are making a value proposition to the customers? I think you already gave a little bit on that one, but what are the some of the things are most interesting to you, what you are hearing?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to start with whom we work with. Like if you look at MuleSoft, right? Our sweet spot for years have been the Fortune, 500,000 companies, like large enterprises. We of course are growing significantly for SMB, and we have now products we genuinely transform SMBs, quite faster, right? But we have been always intimate with largest enterprises, and largest enterprises are complex, right? They're never going to be on one ecosystem, right? So they would have, a different ecosystem for their CRM, they would have a different ecosystem for their supply chain, they would have a different ecosystem for their HR applications based on the persona, right? What is happening with AI and agentic AI is every ecosystem is starting to build out its agentic capabilities, right? So within Salesforce, we have Agentforce, and of course, Agentforce can work outside Salesforce as well. But then SAP has its own agentic platform in Joule. ServiceNow has its own agentic platform built out on ServiceNow platform. Workday would have that. And we anticipate every large enterprise applications, which is synonymous with a particular persona within customers, enterprise, would have their own agentic platform, right? And this is, I'm just talking about the large platforms. Then people will also start building their own custom agents using like, Crew or Google or whatever it is, right? Because the whole agentic transformation is happening a lot more departmentally than centralized. So for example, a CFO is saying, what kind of agent should we have in finance domain that we can, build productivity and drive, faster acceleration of our domain, right? Similarly, your CHRO is thinking that way, your CMO is thinking that way. So we see a situation in enterprise where the way we had API sprawl, we would have an agent sprawl, right?
Yeah.
And these are going to be multi-domain mix of custom and enterprise agents, right? Large enterprise agents and then custom agents. And as you know, with lot of enterprise workflows, they cross across domains. Sometimes it's a custom agent calling two enterprise agents, and vice versa, and all of that. And with MCP and A2A developments, both agent to agent interaction and agent to tool or application interaction would become way more standardized. So in this situation, if you are a CIO, you sit in the operator umbrella, you want to have a control over what's going on in my enterprise and do not want to lose control, because it's very, very easy to have a cyber attack through one of these agents, or some vulnerability, or an agent going rogue and doing something that impacts your customer experience. And this is where the concept of having that single pane of glass to be able to see these agent interactions, intelligently identify based on a use case what is the sequence of agents that's going to be called to execute that particular task, right? And then having an observability across all of these agents, so that you can almost trace how a particular workflow gets executed across all of these agents, becomes absolutely critical, right? And we feel we are probably the best positioned to solve that problem, right? Because for years we have built an experience of solving the same problem in an API landscape, right? Like if you look at and the easiest way to think through is just open a MuleSoft platform and look at a visualizer, and you can see how APIs interact within a particular landscape through that. It becomes so easy to understand. And we almost want to build that network, or we are building that network for your agents, where you as an operator in the infrastructure team, or CIO's team, you can see what are the agents within my landscape. So that's an agent registry, how they are interacting with each other with respect to a particular workflow, figure out how intelligently based on workflow we identify the sequence of execution of these agents, right? And then add that whole governance, security, and observability layer on top of those agents, so that the technology teams feel they have in control of this agent sprawl that's going on in an organization, right? And they're able to secure their organizations and making sure these agents are not going rogue, right? because people talk about agents and they forget the key part of an agent is an agent has agency. That means sometimes agent will autonomously take decisions, and you want to make sure these decisions are in line with your company's culture, company's processes, company's security protocols, and things like that. You cannot do that until you have a visibility across all of those agents, right? And that's the layer we are building for organizations. And we are best positioned to build that because we have done that years with APIs. And APIs will be that layer through MCP that a lot of agents will interact with the applications, right? So we have the skills, the know-how, the experience, understanding of the challenges to build that layer neutrally, because we have always been neutral across whatever the platform it is. It could be a combination of Salesforce, SAP, Workday. We have always been agnostic, and we feel we are going to be that layer for large enterprises, right? Like, so that's where we're going to play, and I think that's going to be the biggest problem for large enterprises to have control over their agent sprawl.
But here is the thing, right? So when you talked about the visualization for APIs, these APIs are built on the MuleSoft. These are the MuleSoft assets where we are giving the visibility. But when we are talking about the agents, these are the external objects to the MuleSoft platform. These are built in a different platforms. Those platforms also try to give this visibility. How is MuleSoft visibility? When do customers need to choose between the what the other platform gives a visibility between the agents versus the MuleSoft's platform's visibility? Did we progress to that extent, or is
Yeah,
it still under
I mean,
progress?
it's a good question, but I think the answer lies in again history, right? Think of MuleSoft. Do we surface only the APIs that exist in MuleSoft? No, right? If you think through Flex, we actually surface the APIs which are built outside MuleSoft, right?
Yes.
Because the customers want a single pane of glass, irrespective of where the APIs are built, because they want to govern and manage them in a standardized way, right? Similarly, many a cases where we have, I mean, you know it very, very well, customer would say, oh, my Workday already has APIs. Why do I need new APIs sitting on top of Workday APIs? Because Workday is not an integration company. Workday has built APIs so that people can connect to Workday, but Workday's core capability is HR. And what MuleSoft does is provides that single abstracted standardized layer, irrespective of your SaaS solution, which companies can manage and govern, right? The same concept is true in agentic world as well, right? Your agent might lie outside MuleSoft. They have been built outside MuleSoft. They, they have been part of a different platform like, Agentforce or Workday or anything like that, right? But end of the day, if these agents are going to interact across domains, you want a single pane of glass of visibility, right? That's where the concept of agent registry comes in. The way we built Exchange, through which you can surface every API, irrespective of Mule, they are built in Mule or not. We would have an agent registry where, irrespective of these agents are built on top of any platform, they can be surfaced, right? And the reason people will choose a platform like MuleSoft to build it, because for an enterprise solution for agent observability and agent management and registration, you're not going to rely on an enterprise platform. The way you don't, like, which company says my enterprise integration standard is SAP? It's not, right? Like, SAP provides integration, but that's not going to be your integration standard, because you are not going to use SAP integration for connecting Salesforce and NetSuite. Always, and the horizontal concerns generally lie within horizontal companies, right? So that's why if you look at observability, every platform has its own monitoring solution. MuleSoft has a monitoring solution, right? But where does this monitoring go to finally? They end up going to a Datadog or an Elk or a Dynatrace, because these are observability platform for an entire enterprise, right? And then you feed in other observability content into that particular enterprise observability solution to have a single pane of glass. The same thing will happen in the agent world. Each solution would have its own agents, probably agent observability as well. But you want all that to integrate it to a single pane of glass where you might have layers, right? So for example, you might have agent orchestration within Agentforce for all the agents that live within Salesforce, right? And then you would have a master orchestration and MuleSoft layer where you are actually using the Agentforce agents, but that particular workflow might involve Agentforce agents and an SAP agent or a ServiceNow agent. And you can't
Got it.
orchestrate it in Agentforce and nor SAP and nor in Workday. It has to be a horizontal solution which is not aligned to a particular domain, which has to be that orchestration layer, right? So I don't see it anything fundamentally differently than what happened in the API world or what happened in the observability world, right? Like with Datadog, the Dynatraces, the Elks, and the similar concerns of the world. It's the same solution. It has to be a neutral solution which is not aligned to a particular domain, provide that standardized experience for agents, for the people who operate these agents. And who best to do that? People who have already been in that business for doing it for APIs for the same concern: observability, governance, security, policies. We are the best equipped to do that because of that experience, and we know what could go wrong.
No, that's a strong case.
I mean, I believe it. I'm like eighth year of MuleSoft, and I've never been more excited about the future of the platform than in last 7 years.
Yeah, that really makes sense now. The way you looked at things, that made sense than looking at from a platform's point of view. One of is on this agentic use case. The another part of the this AI is accelerating the API or the integration by itself, right? So that's where a lot of action is going on. We are also helping a lot of organizations with the help
Yeah,
of
I mean,
Unitech
you
to
and
organize.
Puritech is an amazing partnership.
Yeah. So how do you see it? Because as you have seen so much of the integration journey, what are the some of the things you see could have fast tracked or things could have taken long time were able to go very fast right now?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think anybody who reads the news, the two domains within AI which are front and center of acceleration, one is engineering productivity or developer productivity, right? We know how many, unicorns and decacons are being formed in developer productivity lens, right? And then second is customer service. Those are definitely at the forefront of impact of AI and agents. Everything else is kind of a fast follow, but these you can already see. And if you have dabbled with a Replit or a Lovable or things like that, you also understand yourself the power of it, right? Like I
Yes.
dabble a little bit with Replit, and I can see like the things that I couldn't do. My engineering persona, which hasn't coded since 2009, is more excited to code now, right? With a little bit of vibe coding and things like that. So again, it goes back to how each persona is changing. Developer as a fun persona is fundamentally changing, right? Developers expect a different IDE, expect a different interaction with the IDE, especially on the development piece so far, right? I mean, it is improving on the other piece, but I think where the significant acceleration has happened is how can I develop faster, on my IDE, and how do I bring the experiences that I already have to my current IDE versus force fit my IDE to work differently. So for example, like it's like, if WhatsApp is your communication platform for everything in the world, you rather want to extend WhatsApp to do net new things versus net new things to look like WhatsApp, right? So the same thing with IDEs. If people are getting so much comfortable with using things like Cursor or Windsurf, Devin, whatever, like the most common IDEs in their work where they're dabbling with, they want to continue with that with whatever the new software or the existing software they're developing in the same IDEs. So that's one key thing. That's where if you look at, any point code builder, now customers can actually developers can code with Cursor in ACP, right? Because we understand, right? We are not going to fundamentally change their behavior and the thing that actually giving them significant productivity. We actually want them to be able to do that in our own platform, right? And that's a massive wave in how productivity will improve. Not only productivity but the developer experience, right? Because all said and done, they are probably the biggest persona in the whole MuleSoft lens, right? Because they are the ones who build things that finally end up getting consumed, right? So that's a massive focus for us, making their life easier. But what will come actually is a lot more. I mean, this is, I think, from an industry perspective, a lot more in things like unit testing, a lot more in things like performance testing, things like having being able to intelligently identify defects and bugs and stuff like that, right? Because writing massive amount of code, great. It's like, oh, instead of writing my essay, I asked like chat gpt to write my essay, right? But can I really submit it for my harvard application? I will think 10 times, because I'm like, this is like 10 pages of essay. I don't know what the heck has been written. Does it reflect my experiences, my tones and things like that? And that's the same thing with code. You can write the code really fast, and I can vibe code in my weekends. Would it put it in production for like an e-commerce application which generates 15% of my company's revenue? And that is going to be the next level of frontier when it comes to the coding agents, right? Like, how do you really make the last mile and probably the most critical mile in a developer's journey? Like, how do I make sure this code is manageable? I understand the context of this code. This is scalable. It doesn't have critical defects which might blow up in production, and I have the confidence in putting it in production, right? This is where I think the evolution, even within the coding journey, will happen. And as you can see, we have been front and center in enabling developers to bring their experiences to Anypoint Code Builder, and we will continue to innovate on that, where whatever that next frontier in developer productivity comes in, that will be natively available within ACB, so that they don't have to live their own world. Whatever they have continued to develop, they actually live in the same world within ACB and bring that same productivity benefit to MuleSoft development, right? Extending that to is also the context. Like, for example, your partnership with Curie, like I've been super impressed, talking to Ashish and his team in Curie. You have got Cursor, which are generic IDEs. Then you got things like Curie, which is significantly trained on MuleSoft code. And that context is critical, right? Like, once differentiating between highest quality and high quality, the context is the difference. The more you provide the context, that is the differentiator between highest and high and good. You can work with it, but the top tier quality will come from the top tier context, right? And this is where like things like Curie is taking it to the next level, where it is developed on MuleSoft code. It can go really deep on MuleSoft, and it solves a bunch of problems that I called out in a previous example of like a generic IDE like Cursor. And with Curie's support with Studio, massive unlock for our developers who have been on Studio for years, right? So I think this is where the developer experience will come, and I'm super excited how finally we are addressing an exponential increase in productivity versus in the past. I have been a coder. I mean, I was coding 2002, and that coding experience between then and at least few years before has only been incremental. You got better IDEs and things like that, but not like a 10x unlock, right? But now we have the opportunity of 10x unlock. The thing that we have to be extremely careful is we are not creating 10x garbage, right? Like, you could very well develop 10x faster and write the code which is useless, right? That is where the real frontier of production grade code is going to come from. Anybody can code. Can anybody put it in production? And that's the biggest problem to be solved.
That's great. Yeah, very good insights, Santosh. Because of the time, I have to stop. Even though I have a lot more questions to ask. Is there anything I missed or you feel is important to pass on the message from your side?
No, I think my message is this, right? I think like you and I, uh, being partners to our customers, there has never been a more critical and an exciting time for us to genuinely partner extremely closely with our customers, because this world is new. This world is new for you and me. This world is new for them as well, and they recognize it. None of them expect us to be experts of future, right? What they want is though empathy, right? They want us to be with them figure these things out with them. And when we fail together. But when we succeed together, right? And they want us to bring those experiences from other customer lenses, which we have and they don't, right? Where things are working and what is working. They want us to bring that to them and guide them through that journey and be honest in this journey, right? When things don't work. And I think we have a massive responsibility in making our customers make this journey for their teams, because this will make their future. And that's also massive excitement for us. That's what I wake up for, with that. So my message to, anyone who is partnering with their customers is just to have that sense of urgency, but also empathy that my customers are going through a significant disruption right now, and we have to be there with them every step of the way to help them make that journey, right? Like, so that's pretty much what I think about, most of the time.
Yep, that's a very unique message and important message we miss out on day-to-day basis.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Santosh. It's been so pleasure talking to you, as always.
Yeah, always, Ajay, and thanks for this opportunity. Amazing conversation, amazing questions, and best of luck for next episodes.
Thanks again to Santosh, Senior Director at Mulesoft, for joining us on AI Meets API. His perspective on integration and AI-driven solutions was truly insightful. Until next time, stay curious and stay connected.